How you doing, everyone? Welcome back. Well, you've probably noticed if you've seen any of my videos that I have several Kiss t-shirts, right? Like this one right here. And no, I did not put this on for the video. I've actually been wearing it all day. Um, because, the reason that you might think I put it on for the video is because of the topic of this one. I have been a huge fan since I was small, very small, right? And my brother brought home Kiss Alive 2 when I was little, and I was just blown away, right? Just blown away by it. Just the photography on it, even before he dropped the needle on side one, and I heard the big booming voice in the intro riff to Detroit Rock City. I was just blown away. And when you flipped it over onto side two, you get, what was it? Was it the third or the fourth song on side two? Doesn't matter. I mean, I could go upstairs, grab one of my copies of that record, and verify it. But I know it's on side two. Shock Me, the first song that Ace Frehley ever sang, and then his guitar solo after that song, right? And I was just mesmerized, right? That guitar tone, that unique sound that, I mean, technical brilliance? No. But he's got a sound and a style that nobody can match. And, just a little bit ago, earlier tonight, we learned that Ace Frehley, at the age of 74, has died. And that's hard to take. It is hard to take. I have seen Kiss multiple times in concert. More than most people have seen their favorite band. And I've seen Ace solo a couple of times. And I actually got to meet Ace back in 2019 when I saw him for the last time. I was up in the Chicago area. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I have seen Ace like I said, up in Chicago. Saw him at a casino here in Iowa. I've seen Kiss, several different places. Saw them in Milwaukee. That was the very last time I saw them. When I saw them with, the last time I saw them with Ace, it was in Moline, Illinois. Some at the Alpine Valley up in East Troy, Wisconsin. Yeah. But yeah, Ace Frehley is directly responsible for millions of people picking up the guitar. You know, I mean, a lot of people saw and heard his style and said, hey, I want to do that. You know, if you're my age, right, all those great bands from the 80s, yeah, most of those guitarists picked up their guitars for the first time because of Ace Frehley. I mean, sure, there was Jimmy Page and Brian May and Hendrix and, you know, whoever else, right? Clapton and, you know, but Ace. I mean, then let's get into the 90s. You've got Dimebag Darrell. Dimebag Darrell was a major Ace Frehley fan. Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine. Jason Hook, the former guitarist for Five Finger Death Punch. Heavily influenced by Ace. You know, I mean, in fact, you know what? I just listened to, you know, back in 1978, Kiss released simultaneously. Each one of the members released a solo album. And I just listened to Ace's. And I was reminded why most people say that that's their favorite of the four. You know, and I could, it's, for me it depends on the day of the week. You know, it's going to be either Ace or it's going to be Paul Stanley's album, right? More times than not, Ace wins, though. And I was just reminded why. You know, from that opening riff to Rip It Out until that final fade out of Fractured Mirror. You know, I mean, New York Groove, I mean, that's a song that everybody knows. You know, Ace didn't write that one, and actually Russ Ballard wrote it, but Ace was the only one of the four to actually have a hit song from his solo album. He left Kiss in 1982. Right? He was pictured on the Creatures of the Night album, but he didn't play on it. So he left the band in 1982. Basically, he was kind of fed up with the direction that the band had been going in prior to making Creatures of the Night. He wanted to make a Creatures of the Night album, or a Creatures of the Night style album, instead of the concept album that they made in 1981. And most people say that that album is garbage, and even the members of the band say, yeah, that was garbage, it was pretentious, and we were trying to please the critics instead of the fans. Well, they became huge by telling the critics to, well, telling them where to go. In fact, there was a critic in Seattle in 1974, might have been 75, you know, before Alive came out. You know, they're out there on one of their first tours, and critic says that, you know, I hope these guys have money saved up for their future because they're not going to last very long. Well, 50 years later, everyone knows who they are. You know, it's Penelope, by the way. She came up to comfort me because she knows that I'm not doing well with the loss of Ace. Millions of people picked up the guitar because of him. And, you know, I kind of dabble a little bit. I'm not any good on the guitar. But, you know, I dabble a little bit. I can play a few chords. But, you know, Ace is the reason I picked it up. He's the reason I wanted to play. And now he's going. You know, not a virtuoso by any means, just very unique. Very, I don't know, he just had something there. You know, famous for playing a Gibson Les Paul. And just the sounds he could get out of that. And he wasn't one for using, you know, a lot of guitarists like to use effects pedals and, you know, whatnot. They, you know, not Ace. It was rare that he would use pedals. I mean, every once in a while he might in the studio, you know. But most of the time, no, it was just him plugged into an amplifier making unique sounds that, again, not technically brilliant, but go listen to any Ace Frehley solo you want to, right? Any Ace Frehley solo, and have it not get stuck in your head. See if you can do it. You can. He wrote memorable riffs, memorable solos. He wrote memorable songs for Kiss. Shock Me that was the first one where he ever sang lead. And, you know, on the first 3 albums, you know, he wrote a few songs there. Getaway, which is not a super well-known song outside of, you know, the diehards. Strange Ways. Parasite. Parasite is one that he is very well known for writing. And the one you're most likely to know would be Cold Gin, right? And he wrote more songs later as well. But yeah, I mean, he was, you know, he had a relatively successful solo career. I mean, he never obviously attained the success that he had with Kiss, but, you know, he was out there steadily selling, you know, maybe not millions of albums, you know, but he had gold albums, you know, which is 500,000. That's, you know, I don't know if he ever had a platinum solo album other than the one that he made while he was with Kiss. But yeah, he started up a band that he called Frehley's Comet, which later he kind of dropped that name and just went by his name, Ace Frehley. We joined Kiss in 1996. You know, that they did their, was it 95, I think it was, they did their MTV Unplugged. And, you know, the original four got back together and played on the same stage for the first time since 1979, which led to the massive reunion tour. And, you know, I am not taking it well. You know, because Ace he's always been my favorite, you know. He's always been my favorite. You know, and I read his book called No Regrets, his autobiography, and it's a good read. Now, admittedly, there are some things that he will tell you, he says in his book that there are things that he doesn't remember, but, you know, he was also well known for being into the rock and roll lifestyle big time, right? He was the guy who was throwing furniture out of hotel windows and lots of cocaine, lots of alcohol. In fact, there was one particular incident where they actually took all the furniture, him and some of his buddies, not other members of the band, but like members of the crew. They took all the furniture in his hotel room and glued it to the ceiling. That's one of the infamous Ace Frehley stories. And another one where, you know, he's throwing everything, just trashing the hotel room, throwing everything out the window. I mean, the TV is going out the window, and chairs are going out the window, and everything else. And apparently the police came up, and, you know, again, and the crew, they they threw him in the bed, covered him up, you know, just and they covered for him. It's like, no, he's been here sleeping the whole time. Yeah. So he was kind of a wild one. They did an interview on The Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder back in 1979, and Ace was the star of that show. Of course, Gene Simmons was kind of pissed because Ace just really came out of his shell, right? He was always known as the shy one. You know, the quiet one, the one that, he's not going to say much. But the cocaine and the wine, and he opened up. He stole the show. He was hilarious in that interview. I would actually recommend looking that up. Kiss Tom Snyder. Look for that here on YouTube. Actually, you know what? I'm going to look for it, and if I can find a good copy of that, a good version of that interview, I'm going to post it in the description. So go ahead and click on that link because it is hilarious. But yeah, the Space Ace is gone. You know, of course, as you know, they've all got their characters. You know, their Ace being the space ace. And his backstory was that he is from a planet called Jendel. So maybe I'm going to think of it less as he's dead and more that he just went home to Jendel. I mean, I know he's actually from the Bronx, but whatever. Which, by the way, if you don't know, the name Ace actually came from his ability to get dates. It came from his luck with the ladies. You know, his buddies called him Ace, you know, and this is long before he ever joined KISS. And his real name was actually Paul Daniel Frehley, but Paul Stanley, whose name is not actually, well, his given name is not actually Paul Stanley. In fact, Paul is not even a part of his given name at all. But he had already adopted the name Paul Stanley for the band before Ace came on board. And they're like, well, we can't really have two Pauls, can we? And Ace is like, well, I've got this nickname. I'm going to use that. So that's how that came about. But again, Ace, he was the wild one. He was the wild one. And, you know, it's hard to believe that he's gone. You know, he was on life support for a little bit, and they pulled the plug on him. You know, apparently he fell in his home studio a while back. He canceled a tour that he was supposed to be on this year. And now he's no longer with us. So, the spaceman, I hope he's riding that comet back to his home planet. I'll see you next time.